Today I want to share with you how to make a no-knead spelt sourdough bread. It's very easy, foolproof, and perfect for beginners. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, sourdough, ferments, and more. So if you enjoy learning about those things, consider subscribing to my channel. And don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. The ingredients couldn't be simpler. The first thing that you're going to need is half a cup of your sourdough starter. You're going to want 1 cup of water, just at room temperature, preferably filtered water. It's a little easier on the sourdough starter. And then next you're going to want 3 cups of spelt flour. And then finally all you're going to need is a teaspoon of salt. And I've just got a fine ground sea salt here. Now you're going to want to make sure that your sourdough starter has been fed, which mine was fed last night, and it's nice and bubbly. And those of you who have been with me for a while and have seen some of my other recipes know that I always have a lot of sourdough starter because I actually use sourdough starter just by itself to make different things like pancakes and flatbreads and whatnot. And if you'd like to see that, I'll put a link in the iCards above so you can go watch those videos. And that's how I use up my discarded sourdough starter. So when I go to feed it and I have to discard some, I don't throw it out. I use some of it to cook something. So I'm just going to go in here with a clean measuring cup. This is a ½ cup measure because all you're going to need is a ½ cup of starter. And I'm just going to try to do this as neatly as possible and get that into my bowl. Now, I want to mention to you about the starter. If you don't have a starter yet, you need to make one. I have a video on how to make a foolproof, what I call a foolproof sourdough starter, and I'll also link to that in the iCards. Now don't worry if you don't like rye flour and you don't want to bake rye bread, you're not going to. You're just going to use the rye flour to get your starter going, and then you can transition it to feeding it with all-purpose flour, or some of you may know it as plain flour. And the transition process really couldn't be easier. And I have a video on that also, which I can link to in the iCards. But basically the bottom line is you just start feeding it with whatever type of flour you want to transition it over to. So if you want to transition it to an all-purpose or plain flour starter, just start feeding it with all-purpose flour. And then really, depending on how large or small the amount of starter you have is, you're really looking at a week or less than that, or 2 weeks, whatever the case may be, depending on the amount you have, to transition it to the type of starter that you want. Now, if you absolutely can't find rye flour, don't worry. Whole wheat flour will make the next easiest flour to use to get a sourdough starter going. And then kind of the last resort is all-purpose flour. It is a little harder to get a sourdough starter going with all-purpose flour. So if you can start with rye or whole wheat, it'll be easier for you, especially if you're a beginner. And then next to our sourdough starter, I want to add the 1 cup of filtered water. And I'm just going to add it using this measuring cup just to rinse out any sourdough starter that I have in here that remained. Now, and this was the 1 cup measure. Liquids are always a little different than dry measures. Now, probably all we're going to need is that 1 cup of water, but I'll show you the consistency of the dough, and I'll bring you in close when we get ready to shape it. You want it to be a little on the wet, sticky side. So pretty much usually you just need about 1 cup of water, but depending on the humidity in the air, in your kitchen, in the climate where you live, sometimes if you live in a dry climate, you can need just a touch more of water. But as you start to make this bread, you're going to learn of the level of stickiness, the consistency that you're looking for. But usually about 1 cup works sufficiently. So all you want to do is just give this a little mix with a whisk just to get that sourdough starter mixed in with the water, and then we're going to put that to the side. Now we're going to take the salt and we're going to mix that in with our flour. I don't like to put the salt in with the sourdough starter because I always feel it's a little harsh for it. And so this is just like a little sea salt there. And then we're just going to mix this into the flour. And that's it. Now we're just going to take our sourdough and water mixture and pour that right into our flour. Now we're just going to take clean hands and we're going to mix this all together. So I've got all the flour and water with the sourdough starter mixed together, And I'm going to put a video that I'm going to overlay over this so you can see up close what you're looking for. It's a rather wet dough, and it's a little on the sticky side. You may hear bakers refer to it as shaggy. That's exactly what you're looking for. Now, if you find your dough is very dry and you're having trouble incorporating all the flour and it doesn't have that nice shaggy consistency, no problem. You can add a little extra water, but just start with maybe a teaspoon at a time, because you'd be amazed at how quickly it can go from dry to overly wet. And you want to make sure you have the right consistency. But it's very easy once you get the feel for it and you look at the picture that I overlaid. That'll really help you to know that, oh, okay, I have the right consistency. It's kind of shaggy, it's a little sticky on my hand, it's kind of falling down like you'll see in that video. And then I'll also put a picture here too where I'm just actually holding it and I took a photo. And trust me, if it's not perfect, it's going to come out fine. And it's a process of learning, of trial and error. But after you make a couple of loaves of this, you're definitely going to get a feel for how the dough should be. And I'm hoping that the overlays of the pictures and the videos can help you visually see. I know you can't be here and exactly feel it, but can visually see what you're looking to achieve. Now all you want to do is take a clean towel and just cover your bowl and let it rest for half an hour. Now I've let the dough rest covered there for 30 minutes, and in the interim what I did was get a baking sheet. You'll want to get a baking sheet like this and put some parchment paper on it, and then you'll want to dust the parchment paper with a little flour. You can use your all-purpose flour, you can use your spelt flour, whatever you have. If you want to be fancy, you can use a little cornmeal or a little wheat bran and make it look like the bakers do, and just leave that be. And then we're going to want to dust our board. Just get this ready to receive the bread, and then we're going to want to pull our bread out of here and just go around with your hand. It's like I said, it's a sticky dough, so be prepared for that, and don't worry about it. It's going to come out perfect. Okay, now you see it's a little sticky. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to flatten this down on our board, both sides. Get a little flour on there so nothing sticks. And then all we're going to do is we're going to fold this over like we're folding a letter. We're going to make one fold, see, just like that. Then we're going to pull this one on the other side and fold it over like that, just like if you were folding a letter to put in like a legal size envelope. There you go. The next thing you're going to do is take one side and fold it in like that. And then you're going to take this side and fold it in like that. That's it. Then you're just going to turn it over like this, and you're going to try to shape it best you can into a ball. And what you want to do is just kind of keep going around like this, sort of tucking in under with your fingers, just to get everything nice and cozy. And just keep working it around like this until you get a nice round shape. Obviously flat on the bottom, but just a nice little round shape, a boule. That's it. No kneading, no nothing. A few folds and we're done. But then you're just going to want to pick your little round ball up off your cutting board. Just give it another little shape again. We're going to take a little flour and we're just going to dust the top because we're going to cover this and we don't want anything to stick. There we go. Perfect. Then we're going to take that same towel we used to cover it when we were letting it rest, and now we're going to cover this just like that. Put it in a warm place in your kitchen where it can be undisturbed for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. And what you're looking for is for this to double in size. Now I know that that can be confusing if you're a new baker. What exactly is double in size? Does it look like it's doubled? Does it not look like it's doubled? Don't worry about it. In about 1.5 hours, 2 hours, you can even go the 2 hours if you're not sure, it's going to be fine and it's going to be ready to bake. Yes, there are things like the finger poke test. And yes, there are things like the window pane test. That's usually when you're involved with a bread that involves kneading. And this is a no-knead, which I highly recommend. No-knead is easier, and personally, I think they always come out better. But you don't need to worry about the finger poke test either, because again, as new bakers, that can be very confusing. You poke your fingers in and you see, is it staying still? Is it coming back a little bit? Is it coming back too much? Well, it can just become overwhelming and confusing, and can become somewhat of a discouragement when people are thinking about baking, because they're worried, oh, am I going to get it right? And this, that, and the other thing. It doesn't, I'm going to let you in a little secret. I know bakers will disagree, but it doesn't make a significant difference to a home baker and to homemade bread. Now, yes, things that you buy at the bakery, they really are very perfect, and the crumb is gorgeous, and all of this, that, and the other thing. But with home-baked bread, it's not an exact science, and it doesn't need to be perfect, because even if you underproof or overproof slightly, and if you stay within that hour and a half to 2 hours, you're going to be fine, because slightly underproofed or slightly overproofed in a home-baked bread, you're probably not going to notice the difference. And the nice thing is, everybody loves home-baked bread, and this is going to come out very nice. It's going to be close to what, as home bakers, we would consider perfect. It's very easy, it's pretty foolproof, and you're not going to have any problems with this. And if you underproof or overproof by a little bit, one way or the other, the only difference it makes in the bread is maybe a 10% difference compared to if it was proofed perfectly. And really, we're not professionals. The chances of proofing perfectly can be difficult for home bakers, especially if you're new to baking. So don't worry about it. I don't want you to be stressed. I don't want you to worry about the finger poke test. When you think it looks like it's doubled in size and it's somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours, you're good to go. We're going to go ahead and put it in the oven. The bottom line is, the bread's going to come out fine, and you or your family, your friends, whomever you're baking for, is just going to be happy to have home-baked bread, because the house smells delicious, and you slice that, put some butter on it, it's going to be glorious. So I'm going to go put this in a warm place in my kitchen and let it rise for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Now, while your bread's proofing, the next thing you want to do is get out some type of vessel that you're going to use to bake your bread in. In this case, I'm going to use a large Dutch oven. This is enameled cast iron, but you can also use regular cast iron. And if you don't have either of those, you can use stainless steel, a stainless steel type Dutch oven. The most important thing that you want to make sure of is that it is oven proof up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you're using one of these enameled cast iron pots, you want to make sure that the little knob on top is oven proof up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Some of them are not, so you just want to make sure that yours is. Now, don't worry if you don't have a Dutch oven. You can still bake this bread. Yes, the Dutch oven does create a beautiful loaf of bread, but you will also create a nice loaf of bread if you just bake it right on the baking sheet that we're letting it rise on, or you can transfer it to a cast iron skillet or to any other type of frying pan that's up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit safe. Any type of vessel that you want to bake it in that is oven proof up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit will be fine, and you'll still get a lovely loaf of bread. Now, after your bread's been rising for an hour, at that point you want to preheat your oven to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and you want to put whatever vessel you're using, in this case the Dutch oven, into your oven and let it preheat in the oven as the oven is preheating, because you want this to be very hot when you put your bread into it. Well, this has risen for about an hour and a half. It's looking glorious. And now all I want to do is take a sharp knife and score it. Now, you don't have to do this. You can let it when it rises in the oven, you can let it just crack naturally any way that it wants. It'll look very rustic, that's fine. But I usually like to take a sharp knife and make some cuts, just to make a little pattern on top. If you have a lame, which is the French baking tool, it's got a wooden handle with a little razor blade on the end, you can use one of those too. Obviously, it's a French baking tool, but I find them a little dangerous. They're very, very sharp with those razor blades. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a nice sharp cut right down the middle here. And this knife is pretty sharp, so this is working well. And then I'm just going to put one over here. And then I'm going to put one on the other side. And then I think I'm going to go across this way and make a little crisscross pattern. Now I'm going to put down another baking sheet right here because I'm going to get that very hot pot out of the oven. And when you do it, be very careful. Make sure you have a good set of pot holders. Now I'm going to take this lid off, and when you open this, open it away from you in case steam comes out. Ooh! Alrighty, then the next thing we do is take our bread and drop it right down into the Dutch oven. That's perfect. Be very careful, because you're working with things that are very hot. Then we're going to put the lid on. And then we're going to put this back into our 500-degree Fahrenheit oven for 30 minutes with the lid on. Well, at 30 minutes, I opened the oven and I removed the lid, but then I let the bread stay in the oven, in the Dutch oven with the lid off for a few more minutes just to get a little extra brown coloring on top. And I'll overlay a picture so that you can see what the coloring looked like. It looked almost perfect, but I just wanted a little bit browner on top. And I'll overlay a picture so you can see exactly what it looked like in the oven when I took the lid off. And this is now how the bread looks. Look at this gloriousness. And I'll overlay a picture so you can see it up nice and close. But that is a beautiful, glorious bread. 100% spelt, so it's 100% whole grain, and sourdough. This is very nutritious. And spelt, as you probably are familiar if you're looking to make spelt bread, is one of the ancient grains. So this is just nutritious, it's digestible. For many people it's digestible. And making it sourdough really kicks up the nutrition and the digestibility. Now what I'm going to do is take this out. I'm going to lift it by the parchment paper, and I'm just going to put it on. If I can get it, I want to be careful, and you do the same, because all of this is very hot. And I'm just going to put this right down onto the cooling rack and just let it cool for a minute or two. Once the parchment paper is cooled a bit, I'll pull that out. We'll let it cool at least a little bit. We've got to be a little patient. And then we'll slice it and we'll take a look at a taste. Well, I removed the parchment paper to let it cool even more. So it's still warm, but it's quite a bit cooled down. So I'm going to remove this cooling rack, and I just want to show you. You'll know, if you're new to baking, you'll know when your bread is done, because if you tap it on the bottom, can you hear that? It sounds hollow. And listen to this crust. Isn't that glorious? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this right down the middle so that we can see the crumb. Ah, listen to that. Look at this glorious bread. Oh, and it smells so good. I love spelt. It's one of my favorite ancient grains to bake with. It's not as ancient as einkorn or emmer. You may also know emmer as farro. They have even less gluten than spelt, so often those you really do need to mix with a little, some other types of flour to get them, to get a little bit of a rise out of them. But I like baking with spelt because you can do 100% whole grain spelt and still get a fairly good rise and a nice, it's not a super dense bread. And I'm going to take an up-close picture of this and I'll overlay it so that you can really see this crumb up close and how nice it is. It's not dense at all. it really feels fairly light given that it's 100% whole grain. And I'll overlay that picture so that you can see that. Now I'm gonna cut a nice slice here, and we'll put some butter on it, we'll give it a taste, and I'll put it on a plate, and I'll take another picture so you can see a slice up close as well. Oh, it's still warm. Delightful. Alrighty, let me put this on a plate. Oh, look at this. And I'll overlay a picture so that you can see exactly what this looks like. Now I've got some butter on this, and I just want to mention, this is a very basic spelt bread, 100% spelt sourdough bread. But you can add a little honey if you want to make this sweet. You can add some raisins. There's a lot of variety that you can do with a bread like this. But now you have the basic recipe for a 100% whole grain spelt sourdough bread. Alrighty, let's give this a taste. Delicious. So I hope you'll give this bread a try. It's got a lovely flavor and a lovely texture, and it's easy to make. It's perfect for the beginner. And if you'd like to learn more about traditional cooking, be sure to subscribe to my channel, and then click on this video over here where I show you how to make no-knead sourdough bread using bread flour. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless.